This is IGN. 40 years ago, on November 9th, 1984, Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street opened in theaters, introducing the world to what would become one of the most successful series in horror history, and to one of its most notable characters, Freddy Krueger. As Freddy turns 40, we decided to rank the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Like any long-lasting horror series, there are big ups and downs here, with some incredibly satisfying sequels and some that missed the mark in a big way. So let's get started. We begin with number 8, Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. A combination of elements, including dilution of the character and oversaturation, the first 5 films came out within 6 years, led to the decision to wrap up the Elm Street series in 1991, at least for the time being. Sadly, despite what the poster promised, Freddy did not go out on his best installment, not by a long shot. Pushing Freddy's humor into the most cartoonish places imaginable, Freddy wears a witch hat and rides a broom at one point. The Final Nightmare suffers from flat direction from Rachel Talalay that lacks the atmospheric touches most of the other series boasted. At least it has an amusing Power Glove reference, though, and an appreciated cameo from Johnny Depp, giving thanks to the series that started his career. But let's try and forget that gratuitous and incredibly cheesy 3D sequence that closes out the film. In at number 7, it's A Nightmare on Elm Street 2: Freddy's Revenge. The first sequel shows a series still trying to figure its path out, and unlike most of the other Elm Street films, there is no story connection to what came before except for the main character moving into the same house Nancy once lived in. The whole idea of Freddy being able to physically possess someone and then actually transform into his burnt Freddy body feels out of place, even though the transformation itself is pretty cool. In a scene that even upon release stood out like a sore thumb, Freddy is brought into the real world and massacres a group of teens at a party one after another, in a manner that feels more appropriate for a Friday the 13th movie than the more specific, individualized kills the rest of the series is known for. The most interesting aspect of Freddy's Revenge was apparently accidental, a prominent undercurrent of homoeroticism. Many have said the film reads as being about a teenage boy struggling with his own sexuality, that the filmmakers have said wasn't intentional, but has at least sparked many discussions about the film as something different in the slasher subgenre. Up next at number 6, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5: The Dream Child. On the heels of 2 incredibly popular films, with each outgrossing the previous sequel, The Dream Child unfortunately was the sequel that halted Elm Street's momentum. Stephen Hopkins' installment has some cool visuals and memorable moments, but also suffers from never finding a consistent tone and some performances that are all over the map. At this point, the Freddy movies had become incredibly fun, and Dream Child doesn't live up to that, and while an attempt to bring Freddy back into a bit of a darker feel was commendable, it also isn't a sufficiently frightening film. Still, there are some clever touches, such as the black and white Super Freddy sequence, even if it does briefly put Freddy on a skateboard. Our next film isn't technically in the Nightmare on Elm Street series, but it's a classic nonetheless. And at number 5, it's Freddy vs. Jason. After so many years of anticipation and a rather ridiculous amount of different scripts, it was going to be hard for Freddy vs. Jason to live up to the hype, and unfortunately, it didn't. Still, it was a fun theatrical experience, with opening weekend audiences hooting and hollering in all the right places. When the 2 iconic horror characters fight, the film certainly goes for it, in an amusingly over-the-top, blood-gushing manner. However, Freddy himself only gets in 1 kill in the entire movie, and it's hard not to think of Freddy vs. Jason as a better Friday the 13th movie than it is a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. This movie also gave us the gloriously terrible line, "Freddy died by fire, Jason by water." How do we use that? In at number 4, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4: The Dream Master. Not counting the crossover event that was Freddy vs. Jason, The Dream Master is the highest grossing of the original Robert Englund Elm Street movies and was number 1 for 3 weeks, an amazing feat for a horror film, much less a slasher sequel. And it's easy to see why, as the series was coming off an adored installment that really elevated Freddy's popularity. And The Dream Master goes all in on what people enjoyed so much about Dream Warriors. You like funny Freddy, killing kids in highly personalized ways? Well, here he is, cracking one joke after another while turning a bug-hating gal into a bug, literally sucking the breath out of an asthmatic girl and using invisible karate to fight a kid who loves martial arts. The Dream Master was the first Elm Street movie to open in the summer, and it really is a summer movie. Freddy is front and center, kicking ass and taking names, and the set pieces from future Die Hard 2 and Cliffhanger director Rennie Harlan are bigger than ever. It's not scary, but it's not trying to be. It's a very fun, fast-paced film that was capitalizing on Freddy's moment as one of the true pop culture stars of the late 1980s in a notably effective and enjoyable manner. We've made it to our final 3 Freddy films, and in at number 3, it's A Nightmare on Elm Street 3: Dream Warriors. Many would name this film as their favorite of the series, and with good reason. The first movie had been a significant horror hit with a lot of buzz, and Freddy's Revenge has made even more money, even if it wasn't nearly as well received. But Dream Warriors made Freddy Freddy, catapulting the character himself into giant popularity. Director Chuck Russell, working from a script co-written by Wes Craven and then rewritten by Russell and no less than Frank Darabont, took the Elm Street concept and pushed it creatively, having Freddy, for the first time, use the mind-bending dreams of his victims to target them using things they loved or hated as ammunition. From turning a kid who makes puppets into a grotesque human puppet, to making the track marks on a recovering drug addict begin puckering up, begging to be fed. The movie had its share of scares, looked great, and had a very likable cast, including the returning Nancy played by Heather Langenkamp. But what really made people get into the film was the sense of humor, as Freddy, who'd already displayed a dark sense of humor in previous films, became very funny, complete with plenty of one-liners. No line would better define Freddy than, "Welcome to primetime, bitch," yelled at a girl who dreamed of making it as an actress as he smashed her head into a TV set. Some would bemoan Freddy transforming from a shadowy figure of fear into a spotlighted character always ready with a pun, but Dream Warriors was a terrific sequel that did what the best sequels do, taking the ideas people already loved and going into bigger, more ambitious places with them. At number 2, When Freddy Went Meta, it's Wes Craven's New Nightmare. These days, the idea of something getting really meta and self-reflective is fairly widespread, as TV shows like Community and films like 22 Jump Street see how far they can go with acknowledging the artifice of what's going on. And we're also very used to seeing actors play themselves now, with entire films like This Is the End focusing on heightened versions of real-life people. But in 1994, Wes Craven's New Nightmare was still a notably risky and clever place for a film, especially a sequel to go, much less one that was part of a successful slasher series. Wes Craven returned to the series as writer and director for a trippy, clever, and thoughtful movie in which Heather Langenkamp stars as Heather Langenkamp, the star of A Nightmare on Elm Street, who's asked to return for a new sequel from Craven, who appears as himself. Robert Englund is in the movie as himself as well, but he's also Freddy. Not the movie Freddy, but a real-life embodiment of evil who has come to take the basic form of Freddy Krueger. Craven's sequel tackles the idea of why we're so attracted to horror stories and the role they have in our society, along with the ever-present complaints many have about whether they're appropriate for children. It's a cool and very smart film that really stretches the boundaries of the Elm Street series and has Craven reflecting on his work in a dramatic manner, a couple years before his more comedic take on this type of metamaterial in Scream. The final act goes into some bigger, more overtly supernatural places that don't quite work as well given the rest of the movie's tone and feel, but New Nightmare stands out as something special and unique among both Freddy movies and this genre. And finally, in at number 1, of course it's the film that started it all, the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Some of the sequels would go bigger and commendably build on what was established, but at the end of the day, A Nightmare on Elm Street is what it is in our mind because of Wes Craven's terrific original film. In an era where we were seeing copy after copy of Halloween and Friday the 13th, Craven thought outside the box with a brilliantly conceived horror concept and villain. Moving the slasher movie into the dream realm made things much more dangerous and evocative. How can you run away in this situation? Hell, the dream motif even helped excuse the "why would they ever do that" questions that are so easy to ask in horror movies, as people wander down scary hallways and alleys. We all know that in dreams, we just find ourselves doing something scary sometimes, so you add in the spirit of an undead killer who can actually harm you in this scenario, and you've got something really scary. Freddy himself is an incredible creation. The sweater, the hat, the burnt face, and of course that glove made him instantly iconic and memorable, and Robert Englund was an inspired choice to play him, as the character actor brought true menace and malice to the role. Heather Langenkamp's Nancy was a very relatable, easy-to-invest-in heroine, and you rooted for her and her friends, played by Amanda Wyss, Jesus Garcia, then acting under the name Nick Corey, and in his movie debut, Johnny Depp, to make it through. Yeah, you can nitpick some aspects. How does Nancy set up all those booby traps so quickly? But they're minor quibbles. A Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the best horror movies ever made, with Craven operating at the top of his game and giving the world of film and character that would have a lasting impact on cinematic history. That's your IGN Daily Update. My name is Tony Jackson, and if you want more news on your favorite games and entertainment topics, make sure to visit us at IGN.com. You can also download our free app on your phone or console and subscribe to our weekly podcast through the podcast service of your choice.